motor vehicle crashes, homicides, alcohol overdoses, falls, burns, drowning, and suicides. And whereas kids who have conversations with their parents and learn about the dangers of alcohol and drug use are 50% less likely to use alcohol and drugs than those who don't have such conversations. And whereas the most recent data available from the California Healthy Kids Survey in the San Ramon Valley Unified School District, 21% of 11th graders reported having alcohol in the past 30 days, and 12% report binge drinking, which is 5 or more drinks in a row in the past 30 days. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the Danville Council does hereby proclaim April 2022 as Alcohol Awareness Month and encourages all community members to pledge to take a stand to prevent underage drinking and alcohol abuse and have those courageous conversations with their children to prevent that use and abuse. And we were proud to present that. Kathy Shivington could not be here tonight, that they are at another Valley-wide meeting, but she says she appreciates this recognition to help support their work in this valley. So thank you. And then this takes us to our next item, and we're going to ask Leah Martinez to come back, who is our program supervisor in our recreation department. And this is exciting and a great month as well for National Volunteer Recognition Month. And whereas the entire community can influence positive change with any volunteer action, no matter how big or small. And whereas a sense of caring and desire to share have motivated many individuals to volunteer their time to serve the needs of the community. And whereas town volunteers possess many skills and talents, which they generously, enthusiastically apply to a variety of community tasks. And whereas 233 town volunteers have donated over 887 hours to the town of Danville in 2021. And whereas during the month of April, all over the nation, service projects will be performed, volunteers will be recognized for their commitment to service, and we renew the spirit of service that has enriched our country for generations. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the Danville Town Council does hereby proclaim the month of April 2022 as National Volunteer Recognition Month in the town of Danville and calls upon its residents to pledge to make service a part of their daily lives. Leah, thank you to you and your staff. And I know there's our annual Lend a Hand Day, and there's still time to sign up for it. It's this Saturday. So I'll turn it over to you to say a few words. Thank you, Leah.
Thank you, Mayor Arnrich and the Town Council for this proclamation. I really appreciate the opportunity to recognize the 233 town volunteers who were able to serve the community in the last year and look forward to working with all of the volunteers in 2022. I understand that one of the greatest gifts anyone can give is their time. And I will close with a brief quote by Elizabeth Andrew that volunteers do not necessarily have the time, they just have the heart. And we greatly appreciate the heart of all of the volunteers within the town of Danville.
Yeah, that's well said. What a wonderful quote. I would just add that we have many organizations that support not only on the Lend a Hand, but do it on a regular basis. I know the Danville Sycamore Valley Rotary Club for about the past 6 or 7 years has done what's called Rotary Home Team. And it's any senior here in the Valley that needs very minor plumbing, electrical, miscellaneous repairs, landscape and stuff. And that if you go to their website, you can sign up. And it's a really great team of people. And they do wellness healthcare checks as well. So any other council members, anybody else want to add anything to this? Seeing none. Okay, great. Leah, again, thank you on behalf of the entire council. Unfortunately, some of us are gone this Saturday. We've planned a trip out of town, so we're so sorry to not be able to be there. I'm the local plumber guy. Grew up with a plumber in my house, so if you need plumbing help, call me and I'll fix it for you. Well, not everybody's, but anyway. Thank you, Leah. All the best to you and your staff. Okay, this will take us now to item number 6, which is our consent calendar. And tonight, that's items 6.1 through 6.7. These items can be voted on in one action by the council without discussion as they're considered routine or that they have been looked at previously. However, if there's anybody in our attendees, our audience, who would like to have one removed for discussion, we can do so. If so, please raise your virtual hand and we'll call on you, and you have up to 3 minutes and we will pull that item. So at this time, is there anybody in our audience who would like to pull a consent calendar item for discussion? Marie, I do not see any. Do you see any? And did we receive any correspondence?
No, no requests to speak on any of the consent calendar items, and no public comment on any of the consent calendar items.
Okay, is there anybody on the council who would like to remove any? Seeing none,
No.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve item 6.1 to 6.7 on the consent calendar.
Second.
It's been moved by Vice Mayor Storr, seconded by Councilmember Morgan. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Marie, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Councilmember Fong,
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan,
Yes.
Councilmember Stepper,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Storer,
Here. I mean,
And
yes.
and Mayor Arnerich.
Aye.
Okay, the consent calendar was approved unanimously.
Okay, Robert, we got that. You are here and you are voting yes. Okay. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, this takes us to item number 7. And we have 2 items into that. The first one is 7.1 and a recruitment announcement by our city clerk, Marie Sinceri.
Yes, the town is now recruiting for a youth poet laureate, and that would be for a Danville resident of high school age for a 2-year term beginning July 1st. And it is Volunteer Recognition Month, so what better way to get involved than to volunteer as the Youth Poet Laureate or a number of other positions we have open, which are Bicycle Advisory Commission, the Parks, Recreation, and Arts Commission, and the Contra Costa County Library Commission. And those applications are due on May 16th at 4 p.m. They're available on the website, and applicants will be interviewed by the town council on either May 31st or June 21st for terms that begin July 1st.
Marie, thank you for that. And just on behalf of the whole council, we just want to extend our thanks to a young student, Sonia Sharma, who was the one who came up with the Youth Poet Laureate and worked with our Adult Poet Laureate. And we look forward to having the interviews and hope that we have a lot of young people who want to participate in this. So thank you. This takes us to item number 7.2. And this is our legislative update by our Deputy Town Manager, Diane Friedman. Diane, welcome, and it's all yours.
Okay, good evening, Town Council. I'm pleased to be here to provide this, what I believe is a very brief legislative update to you. During the month of April, the state legislature is active with bills that move through the policy committee and hearing process in their respective houses. The legislature did have a one-week recess. I think that's their spring break. They did have that last week and they reconvened yesterday. During the months of April and May, our advocacy work will continue to be focused on impacting legislation that has a negative effect on Danville. May 27th is the last day for bills to be passed out of their house of origin. This marks the halfway point of the legislative session. After the May 27 deadline, the bills move out of their house of origin and go through the same policy and committee hearing process. Since the last staff report to Town Council on March 15th, the Tri-Valley Cities Coalition of Livermore, Pleasanton, Dublin, San Ramon, and the town of Danville identified bills with our lobbyists, Townsend Public Affairs, that will be the focus of our advocacy work this session. The Tri-Valley Cities Coalition has defined 6 legislative focus areas, including transportation, climate and environment, economic development, affordable housing, mental health, and fiscal sustainability for the 2022 session. These policy areas were reviewed and signed off by the mayors in January and were updated in the Tri-Valley Legislative Framework. On March 21st, the Tri-Valley Cities mayors, managers, and staff liaisons met to review new legislation and discuss bills that will be the focus of our Tri-Valley Cities advocacy work for the session. The following bills have been highlighted thus far. The first two bills are the 2-year bills. The first one is under mental health, and this is AB 988. We are hoping to get this bill over the finish line this session. This bill would require the Office of Emergency Services to take actions to implement a hotline system designating 988 Crisis Hotline Center or centers to provide crisis hotline intervention services and crisis care coordination to individuals that are having a mental health crisis. And again, this is a 2-year bill that we did support. We are supporting it again. There is a parallel bill on the federal side that may be enacted as of this summer. So we do have some wind in our sails on this bill. The second 2-year bill is under climate and environment. This is AB 1512. This was another Assembly Member Bauer-Cahan bill. This is the off-highway vehicular recreation, the Carnegie State Vehicular Recreation Area. This bill would require the department to preserve in perpetuity land known as the Alameda Tesla Expansion Area, which is currently part of the Carnegie State Vehicular Recreation Area for conservation purposes, including for non-motorized public recreation. The next bill under climate and environment is AB 2374, again by Assembly Member Bauer-Cahan. This is a crimes against public health and safety illegal dumping bill. This bill would increase the maximum fine for the dumping of commercial quantities of waste to $5,000 for the first conviction and $10,000 for the second conviction and up to $20,000 for the third conviction and any subsequent convictions. The TVC Coalition supports this bill as well. The next bill is SB 45. This is the short-lived climate pollutants organic waste reduction goals bill. This bill would require the Department of Resource Recycling and Recovery, better known as Cal Recycle, in consultation with the state board to provide assistance to local jurisdictions, including but not limited to any funding appropriated by the legislature for purposes of assisting local agencies to comply with short-lived climate pollutant bills, mostly around SB 1383. And the TVC Coalition supports this bill. Next bill under climate is SB 852. This is the Climate Resilience Districts Formation Funding Mechanisms. This bill would authorize a city, county, or special district or a combination of any of these entities to form a climate resilience district for the purpose of raising and allocating funding for eligible climate reduction projects and the operating expenses of those projects. And the TVC Coalition also supports this bill. Next, under affordable housing, AB 2063, density bonuses, affordable housing impact fees. This bill would prohibit affordable housing impact fees, including inclusionary zoning fees, in lieu fees, and public benefit fees from being imposed on a housing development's density bonus units. The TVC Coalition opposes this bill. And we have authored and submitted a letter which will be included in the legislative committee's packet for the meeting next week. The next bill is SB 1466, Affordable Housing and Community Development Investment Program. This bill would establish a state government affordable housing and community development investment program, which would authorize funding to be administered by the Affordable Housing and Community Development Investment Committee for affordable housing projects. Projects eligible for funding include pre-development, development, acquisition, rehabilitation, and preservation of workforce and affordable housing. And the TVC Coalition supports this bill. The next bill under housing was AB 2179, development fees and charges. This bill would prohibit a public agency from imposing a minimum automobile parking requirement or enforcing a minimum automobile parking requirement on residential, commercial, or other developments if the development is located on a parcel that is within 1/2 mile of public transit. The TVC opposed this bill. And this bill was, as of our last legislative committee, this bill was gutted and amended to be the COVID-19 relief tenancy bill, which means that the eviction protections have been extended through June 30th. This bill was adopted as an urgency ordinance, and what it means is that it was fast-tracked through the legislative process and sent to the governor for signature. The bill was already chaptered into law, and this underscores how fast the legislature changes and how important it is to monitor these bills. Under transportation, AB 1814, the Transportation Electrification Community Choice Aggregators Bill. This bill would, as part of the PUC or the Public Utilities Commission program, authorize community choice aggregators to file applications for programs and investments to accelerate widespread transportation, mostly around EV funding. So this would benefit MCE for us. The TVC Coalition supports this bill. And the last bill that we are monitoring is AB 1737. This is Children's Camp Local Registration and Inspections. This bill would make minimum standard provisions for organized camps established by the State Public Health Department, the State Fire Marshal, and local health officers applicable to children's camps, and would define children's camps as a camp that offers daytime or overnight experiences administered by professional adults who provide social, cultural, educational, recreational, or artistic programming to more than 5 children between 3 and 17 years of age for 5 days or longer during at least one season. And this obviously impacts all of our recreation camps. It would require registration of all camps with a local agency 90 days before commencing operations or submitting and operating an emergency plan to a local agency. It requires a local agency to inspect camps and become an administrator of corrective action for violations. So in essence, this would create Danville as the local authority over these camps, which is a place that we do not want to be. It also requires camps to provide specific background checks, certifications, and employ a health official at each site. In regard to this bill, our lobbyist, Townsend Public Affairs, set up a meeting with Assemblymember Holden's staff to discuss this bill and its impact on local jurisdictions. Danville staff member Kat Bravo participated in the meeting along with the legislative lead for Pleasanton. Both have a recreation background. The meeting was beneficial to Assemblymember staff because it provided specific feedback on what the challenges of this bill would be, and that many of the background requirements and training certifications are already being provided under this bill. It was very helpful to the Assemblymember staff. They are now looking at amendments. We expect this bill to be heavily amended, and we are tracking this very, very closely. And this is a very nice segue into speaking of Kat Bravo, Danville's administrative analyst in general government. Kat will be moving into the staff legislative liaison position as of July 1st. In preparation for this transition, Kat has been observing the legislative committee meetings, participating on the TVC weekly conference calls, and is now assisting in preparation of legislative reports. Town Council can expect to see more of her as we pass the baton before July 1st. Under grants, the next round of federal community project funding is here. The town submitted for federal funding in the amount of $500,000 for the fiber optic cable interconnect project as part of the next round of earmarks or community projects, as they are now known. The town also submitted a request for funding of infrastructure to State Assembly Member Rebecca Bauer-Cahan and Senator Glazer. The request was again for the cable interconnect project. We're hedging our bets. If we don't get it at the federal, that hopefully we will get it at the state, and $700,000 for the Lagonda Bridge project. At Council's direction, the town continues to be actively engaged in legislative advocacy efforts that are aimed at protecting and promoting Danville's best interests. The next legislative committee meeting is this coming Tuesday, April 26th at 9 a.m. via Zoom. The committee will be reviewing bills outside the scope of the TVC work that impact Danville. We will be providing an update to Town Council in May. This concludes my report, and with that, Mayor Arnrich, I will hand it back to you for questions or comments.
Well, Diane, well done. That was pretty comprehensive. We all knew Kat was working there in the background, but you finally let the cat out of the bag, so to speak. So yes, we're excited about that. We look forward to having her under your stewardship take over that role, and she is really excited to help support us in that area. And anybody who's listening who would like to join in that meeting, you can listen in. You can go to the Town of Danville website, go into our meetings and agenda. You can go down and click on that agenda, and it will get you the Zoom link. Any questions or comments of Diane at this time from council? Let's go to Renee and then Karen.
So thank you, Diane, so much. I mean, I'd love to get this as well from you. I'm sure that we probably will get a copy as council. So just to take a look at it. As you know, we have that 2 people from our council are on the liaison. So the rest of us listen in afterwards and get reports regularly. So we really appreciate it. I also wanted to just take a moment to congratulate Kat on her promotion, so-called promotion, coming up in July. I think she'll do a great job. I'm looking forward to having her at the helm at that as well. One of the questions that I had was on the AB 1735, when you met with them, did you have any movement? Did they understand your concerns with the making it a local authority situation? Were they willing to do any amendments to the bill?
Yes, they were. We're looking at redefining the definition of camps that possibly would exclude us. And they are working on amendments right now. And in fact, they reached out to us after the meeting asking similar questions. So we are hoping, and you know, the CPRS, this is a bill that everybody is weighing in on, and they are listening, and we are expecting amendments, and we will update you as soon as they come through. But yes, very much so.
Okay, thank you.
There are also, it's a good question Renee brought up. You know, the state has lots of agencies, and I mentioned my son-in-law works in one of those for daycare and things. All those private facilities, they do the licensing, they do the certification. Whereas this is really one of those unfunded mandates for us to weigh in into these private events, when really that is a good state responsibility. There should be state standards. They have the resources and they should do that. And that's part of the push. And, you know, our team and the Tri-Valley was advocating that we as public agencies already have those standards in place. And we don't want to be the police of everybody else. We have enough to take care of our programs, and we have very high standards. So hopefully that, as Diane said, that really does come out. Karen, Councilmember Stepper.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for your report again. They've been fantastic and consistent. So appreciate that, Diane. I wanted to ask you about SB 852, because I think I still heard a strange explanation by the legislature of what that bill does. So that's one where we have not taken a position, or we have.
The TVC supports this bill. We have taken a position on that. It creates a separate entity, you know, districts that really provide for flexibility around funding for climate resilience projects.
Okay, so that's that word and the word I heard earlier, climate resilience and climate reduction. I think these bills are an attempt to look at the environment and not having negative effects on the environment. To say that we are creating the climate that exists outside our window is a very strange stretch. But I understand now what we're talking about when we get these groups together so that they can have the funds to do a project that's substantial. So, okay, thank you so much for the report.
Thank you.
Diane, thank you very much for that. I guess we're going to get maybe two more reports from you. But we will look forward to seeing you, and I assume Kat will be sitting in as well next Tuesday. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this takes us to item number 8, and item number 8 is under administrative staff reports, and item 8.1 is to consider adoption of resolution number 27-2022, authorizing the installation of traffic calming measures on Greenbrook Drive, St. Christopher Drive, St. David Drive, and Harlan Drive. This is a project that has been about 3.5 years, 4 years in the making. And Andrew Diller, our transportation manager, is going to start us off on this. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members of the Town Council. As Mayor Arnerich described, the item before you is considering approval and adoption of Resolution 27-2022 to authorize traffic calming measures along Greenbrook Drive, St. Christopher Drive, St. David Drive, and Harlan Drive. And I do have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Andrew, while you're doing that, I just want to announce to anybody that's here to make public comment on it, our process will be, we will have staff, Andrew will make a presentation. Council members will have the opportunity to ask questions only, and we'll save our comments till after we open the public hearing. And anybody who would like to speak will have up to 3 minutes, and we'd love to hear your comments. Then we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the council to address any questions, discussion, and then action. Andrew, back to you.
Great. Just want to verify if everyone can see my screen.
No. We cannot.
Oh, you cannot. Okay.
We can't
with
see
me?
you either. You disappeared. Now we can see it's coming up.
Okay.
There it is, but we see the background of your computer.
I don't know what happened. 1 second.
That's
Technical difficulties. Here we go.
Well,
Erin Stepper can see your screen and she knows a comment I told her about. I won't say it out loud. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. How about now?
Perfect.
Okay.
yes. But we could make it bigger.
Okay, we can do that. How's that?
Thank
There you go. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for bearing with me. So good evening again. So the item before you again is consideration of traffic calming devices in the Greenbrook Drive area neighborhood. By way of background, as you probably remember, back in 2017, you approved a traffic calming plan for Greenbrook Drive North. That was the area north of El Capitan, between El Capitan and Sycamore Valley Road. This particular NTMP is south of El Capitan to Camino Ramon, and it also includes St. Christopher Drive, St. David Drive, and Harlan Drive, as mentioned. So because it's been so long since we've been before the council regarding NTMP matters and requesting approval for measures, I thought I'd go over a couple of high points of the program. And just a refresher here. So as you know, this was initiated, this program, back in '96. It's a community-based approach for addressing residential traffic calming, residential traffic concerns. And to date, we've had over 50 neighborhoods participate in the program in some shape or form. So the actual process, it's basically a 4-step process. First is preliminary screening, data collection, and analysis. So we get some complaints. We ask the neighborhood to submit an application. We go out and collect data, and then we determine if the neighborhood meets the criteria to move forward. From there, if we do find that the data meets the criteria, we go ahead and we start involving the neighborhood with public outreach. We host a series of meetings. In this case, we held a series of 3 meetings with the neighborhood. We determine the appropriate course of action, whether they're what we call category 1, 2, or 3 measures for either educational awareness and enforcement measures, traffic control devices such as basic signing and striping, and then category 3, which is more restrictive measures, are things like speed lumps and speed humps, which we're all very familiar with. From there, we go to a neighborhood petition process, and if we receive that petition back and it's successful, we move on to step 3 here, which is where we're at this evening, which is a proposal that's presented before the town council for consideration. Upon approval, we go ahead and we move to the last step, which is implementing those measures. And From there, we measure the effectiveness and hopefully those traffic safety concerns are addressed. So moving on to Greenbrook Drive, the NTMP timeline. This has been one of the longer efforts we've had in the NTMP, and a lot of that has to do with the sheer size of the neighborhood, as well as throw in COVID for 2 years, and it stalled the process. So it's been a long time in the making, but this really started back in 2017 with some more official initiations with application being submitted. We went ahead and conducted traffic studies along the aforementioned streets, and we found that the vehicular speeds ranged anywhere between 26 miles an hour and 33 miles an hour. We consider everything up to or below, I should say, 32 miles an hour acceptable for residential streets. But once it starts getting over that, then we start seeing that we do have some issues. In 2018, as I mentioned, we held a series of meetings to vet the issues and to go over various options for traffic calming plans. This was a very involved process, and I'd like to give a shout out to a former employee, Thomas Valdrez, who worked very extensively with the neighborhood at the time. He's since moved on, but he did a lot of great work during that time to get these neighborhoods organized. We actually conducted a neighborhood survey, which I'll show, which was kind of electronic survey just to get a better gauge of the neighborhood concerns. And then, as I mentioned, we went ahead and prepared some traffic calming plans. Skip ahead to 2019, St. David Drive was the first street to submit their petition, so kudos to them. And that was for speed lumps, which you'll see here in a moment. Since then, again, we've had COVID, and then the neighborhoods just continued to work on those petitions. And then finally, in early 2022, we did receive those petitions for Greenbrook Drive and St. Christopher Drive. To date, we have not received one for Harlan Drive. This is a look at the entire neighborhood area of the 4 streets mentioned. The parcels highlighted in purple were the ones included in the petition process. A summary of our NTMP requirements for the petition. It's 1 vote per property or parcel. We require 70% approval from the primary streets, in this case, Greenbrook, St. David, and St. Christopher, and of course, Harlan did not submit. We require 50% from the adjacent streets, and we try to be pragmatic at the staff level as to who we include in that petition process. When it comes down to things like radar signs, speed lumps, things that are physical in nature, we really try to work with the neighborhood and the residents who are going to be directly affected with those and make sure that they're on board with the locations of those. And we really do that all the way up to installation day. We work hand in hand with the residents on that. This is a real quick snapshot. I have several of these, but because just for time, I just want to give a general overview of some of the concerns that were stated, particularly on Greenbrook Drive, because as you all know, as council members, we've had a lot of concerns over the years, well before 2017, about speeding and traffic on Greenbrook. But you can see here, this is a snapshot of some responses we received. Cut through traffic's a concern, bike and pedestrian safety at the trail crossings. That not only includes Iron Horse, but at the Cow Creek and the Greenbelt crossings. School-related issues, and then of course, number 1 on this list at the bottom is speeding. So not to anybody's surprise. This is a real busy map. I apologize for this, but this is a snapshot of the different speeds and volumes on the various streets. You can see that Greenbrook Drive has speeds between 33 and 29 miles per hour, depending on where you take the survey. Harlan Drive was 33 miles an hour. St. David was a little bit lower because that's a lower volume street, 26 miles an hour. And Harlan at the other end was 29 miles an hour, or almost 30 miles an hour. This is a quick look. We did some ped and bike counts as well along the Iron Horse Trail and along the Cow Creek Trail, which actually there's no crossing there, but students in the morning, that's a very popular spot to cross the roadway, even though there's no crosswalk or curb ramps there. And you can see that the ped activity on a weekday, there's over 100 crossings there at that unofficial crossing. So some interesting data there. So just way of background again, this is the 2017 plan that was completed for Greenbrook North. And basically what's being proposed for Greenbrook South carries forward that Greenbrook North plan that includes pavement, share the road, pavement legends, a radar sign or signs, pavement markings with the 25-mile-an-hour emblem on the roadway, and various other speed limit signs. So this plan that we did for North Greenbrook is basically carrying forward for South Greenbrook. This is an example of what I just spoke to. In the upper left-hand corner is the speed lumps that you're all familiar with. The bicycle sharrows there that you see in the middle of your screen, the radar sign, that's the one on Greenbrook Drive, and of course the pavement legends there. So these are pretty busy maps. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on these. There's a lot of detail, but this is basically the layout of existing and proposed measures. And what you're looking at is Greenbrook Drive. Starting to your left is Camino Ramon, working your way to your right in the upper right-hand corner, all the way to El Capitan. It includes signage. It includes radar signs at 2 locations, the aforementioned pavement markings and signage. And there's also 3 crossings that are proposed, and we're proposing that as a phase 2 project because of the cost, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. I'm going to dive into each one. This is each, I've broken that big map down into 5 locations. This is starting at the Camino Ramon end, where you see a radar display sign, some pavement markings, some signage, share the road markings. Working our way east, closer to Harlan, that continues there. You see the Iron Horse Trail on your left, a radar sign as you head closer to Van Patten Drive. And I'm noting that this crossing here would be phase 2 as proposed. Continuing on past Harlan Drive, you see more signage and pavement markings there. This is as you're approaching the curve there at Cow Creek. The aforementioned crossing is on the left-hand side here. And again, this would be proposed as the phase 2 project because of the expense of it. Moving on to the end of Greenbrook Drive, again, up to El Capitan, there's another greenbelt crossing there as well. And again, that would be phase 2. So moving on to St. Christopher Drive, which in your left-hand corner, you can see that was the area where we just were with Greenbrook. This plan is for a radar sign. They wanted a center line and shoulder striping, similar to what you already see on Greenbrook Drive and what you see on Paraiso and El Capitan. And this is kind of a crude exhibit of what that looks like with the parking lane striped and the center lines. They also wanted the radar sign. Looking at the detail map, starting at Greenbrook on your left, you can see that there's pavement markings as you head east. The radar sign here in the middle of your screen. The center line and striping continues. You head up the hill on St. Christopher past Harlan Drive. There's the existing stop signs in the middle there with the pavement markings and the center line stripe, all the way to the top where it meets El Capitan. So the 3rd street is St. David Drive. This one's a little bit simpler. They wanted speed lumps, and there was a bit of discussion at the beginning of this process for that neighborhood, and kudos to the folks who worked on the petition, the residents. They really worked with them to make sure that the locations were where the residents wanted. So we had to move those a little bit here and there through the process, but ultimately, the plan is for 3 speed humps. So the top of the screen here, that's St. Christopher Drive there. As you move down, you see your first speed hump here. It is a little bit small by 673. Down at the bottom of your screen, there's a second one near 663. And then you continue south. There's a 3rd one as you approach St. Luke Court. And those would be accompanied by 2 speed hump advisory signs, and they have 15 mile per hour advisory plates that go with those. The 4th plan is Harlan Drive, and we did not receive a petition as of yet for Harlan Drive. And that petition would include speed lumps towards the St. Christopher end, as well as centerline and shoulder striping. We understand that that's still in progress, but they may or may not submit. So we didn't want to wait too much longer because so much time has passed. So at a staff level, we're recommending some basic traffic safety signing and striping measures that include striping crosswalks across the side streets on Harlan Drive from one end to the other. And this is important to note because Greenbrook School, as you see in the bottom, it's a safe route to school. So we want to improve that access to the school site. Also includes some 25-mile-an-hour pavement legends and some share the road bicycle pavement legends. And those are actually part of the bicycle master plan, one of the recommendations too. So these are pretty passive signing and striping things that we would normally do when we do a pavement project. We'd add those at a staff level. So we wanted to take the opportunity from a staff recommendation to add these as part of the recommendation before you this evening. And again, if Harlan Drive produces a petition for the speed lumps, at some point we would bring that back to the town council. So again, phase one, this is a summary of what's being proposed for the phase one measures, the Greenbrook Drive signing and striping, radar signs, St. David Drive, the speed lumps, the St. Christopher Drive signs and pavement markings and striping, and one radar sign, and the Harlan Drive signing and striping safety improvements that I just went over. As I mentioned, the crossings on Greenbrook Drive at the Cow Creek Trail there and the Greenbelts, we're proposing that would be a phase two measure that would come later. Part of the reason is because of the amount of design and construction that's required to do those. We would propose raised crosswalks for those locations and curb bulb outs or extensions. Rough estimate for that is about $140,000. So we'd want to pursue some sort of grant funding for that. And we could also consider coupling that with the Greenbrook Drive, El Cap and Paraiso Iron Horse Trail raised crosswalk projects that is similar in scope. So there's a possibility to couple it with that too. So as far as the next steps, if the council is to approve this plan this evening, we'd move on to phase one fairly quickly and get all the signing and striping completed in the spring, early summer of this year. And phase two would be in fiscal year 2023 once we procured funding for those raised crosswalks. And then we'd go ahead and do a post study this time next year to see how the phase one measures were working. So that's the end of my presentation. I would like to stop share, but I do have one other item to share. I'd like to bring to the council's attention that we did receive two letters or communications from residents. One was from a resident from the St. David area. They were interested in adding an additional speed lump on St. David Drive.
That was David Bowen.
That was Mr. Bronson, David Bronson. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
And staff, actually, we held a Zoom call with the resident to go over, possibilities for doing that. Ultimately, decided to move forward with the plan at hand. If at some point the neighborhood would like to come back for an additional, we would entertain that with a petition. And then also we received a letter from Miss Beersdorf, had concerns regarding signage that's proposed at the corner of Greenbrook and Harlan, specifically at, well, I'll just leave it at that, at the intersection of Harlan and Greenbrook. That sign that she was concerned with can be easily relocated to another streetlight pole. So we've responded to Ms. Beersdorf that we will work with her to make sure that there's not a sign in front of her home.
Great.
So with that, I would, I'm sorry, one other thing. I'd be remiss to say I'd like to also thank Caitlin Costa, our new transportation program specialist, who worked extensively on this program. She's been doing a fantastic job managing the NTMP. And I didn't want to throw her in the fire in her first few months here with a large NTMP, but you'll be seeing a lot more of her with these endeavors in the future. So
great. Thank you, Caitlin. Yeah, thank you very much and welcome aboard. This has been a long time since the council has actually seen any of these, more than 3 years. Andrew, one thing that's really important, because there are a few people probably listening and there's always confusion about this, and good for the council. There's humps, lumps, bumps, and undulations. It's kind of like a rhythm. What's really important is we do not do speed bumps. Speed bumps are what you find in parking lots. Those are those very vertical, very abrupt, very hard on your suspension systems. Can you talk about what we design when you talk about speed lumps? And sometimes we drift and say speed bumps, but we don't really mean it. What do they do? How are they addressed? The posted speed, how do they work? And how does it affect fire department, what we do to accommodate fire trucks?
Great question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, there are 3 different classifications. The 2 that we do use are speed humps and lumps. And the minor difference between the 2 is the humps are a solid speed hump that goes across the road. The lumps have 2 brakes in them and they're wheel tracks, so they can accommodate emergency response vehicles. And San Ramon Valley Fire has basically signed off on those, that they do not adversely affect the response times. So for generally over the last 10 years, I would say the majority of everything we've installed have been the speed lumps.
Right.
Now the lump itself is designed for a 25-mile-an-hour roadway, whereas as you mentioned, the parking lot speed bump is meant for about 5 miles an hour. However, the speed lump, although it's designed for 25 miles an hour, we do post advisory signage of 15 miles an hour that accommodate those speed lumps. And that's consistent with the manual and uniform traffic control devices for posting and warning the driving public of those devices. So it's the basic differences between the 2.
Great, thank you for that. Great, we'll open it up to council questions only at this time. If we could refrain from our comments, and we'll start with Dave Fong, Councilmember Fong.
Thank you, and Andy, great presentation. A couple of 3 questions. One, you mentioned that we're referencing the North Greenbrook implementation. Do you have any survey results on the effect of what we were able to implement in the North Greenbrook area?
Yes, thanks, Council Member Fong. Yes, we do. So we actually did post surveys before COVID. So we did see a reduction in speed, particularly near the radar display sign. That was the most effective. It was about 1.5 to 2 miles per hour. We do plan on doing additional surveys because, as we know, behaviors have changed since COVID.
That's right.
Traffic wise. So we will be doing additional surveys, probably in conjunction with any post surveys we might do with this one.
Great, thank you. That you anticipated my question, and it's post pandemic behavior that I worry about. Second question I have is, as we take a look at Greenbrook, and as you're traveling on Greenbrook going west, late in the afternoon, it's blinding sunlight, and it tends to be a little bit of a travel hazard, especially around the Iron Horse Trail area. I know you're doing and have done a survey of traffic patterns and traffic speed, but did you take into account the sunlight during that part of the day? Because I worry a little bit we wait too long when we've got a situation with low sunlight right now and blinding light and potentially accidents happening.
Yeah, we don't really correlate those 2 as far as speeding and volume traffic and the sun, but the way we do look at that is through our collisions.
Okay.
Particularly at the Iron Horse Trail there, which is our hot spot for collisions. So we do look at that. That's the one metric between the sun, whether it's settings, particularly in summertime, and collision rates. And that's also the #1 complaint we get from our trail users and drivers.
Right.
That time of day is tough to see. So that's the way we look at that as far as, the sun setting.
And the primary issue there is to slow people down as slow as possible, so that if you are blinded, that you have the opportunity to go more cautiously. So That's why the speed tables, the speed lumps in those areas are so critical.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Stepper? Karen, if you can unmute.
Councilmember Fong, the main question had to
Okay.
do with what was the effect of the north roads and the changes that were made. But the one that's today that I wanted to understand a little bit better was the Cow Creek Trail. Had you talked also to the schools about their effects on these programs? What they think, because they hear from their kids, you know, that show up at the Greenbrook School. So Cow Creek is one where you're saying kids are crossing all the time, so.
Yeah, so for this plan specifically, we didn't talk to the school, but we, in general, with the Greenbelt crossings, the existing crosswalks, we have heard from the school and we work with them on hotspot locations. Particularly in this case, we're talking about Charlotte Wood probably because that's the connection from this Greenbrook area that uses that Greenbelt Trail and goes up to Charlotte Wood. So we have heard of, you know, we do get complaints from the school, particularly the parents more than the school itself. But the school is usually right in the vicinity of the school areas where we get the complaints and inquiries. And actually earlier this year, because of, you know, everybody returning back to school, we beefed up the signing and striping directly in the vicinity of the school there at the crosswalks. But as far as the Cow Creek Trail crossing and some of the green belts, we have heard it over the years, ever since I worked here, really, that, you know, those trails kind of abruptly end and then there's no curb cuts and the kids just kind of cross there anyway. So it's something that we've definitely heard about over the years.
Great, thank you.
I'm sure it happens because it also happens when you're out walking on the trails through Greenbrook because that's the shortest way. So anyway, thank you for that input.
Great. Okay, any other questions before we open the public hearing? Councilmember or Vice Mayor Storr.
Thank you.
Licking his hands.
Yeah, Andrew, thanks for the explanation on Harlan Drive. But the things that we are actually doing on Harlan does not require neighborhood consensus.
No, there's signing and striping measures that we feel as staff recommendation and staff level that typically would not require neighborhood consensus on. As I mentioned, there are crosswalk striping across existing intersections on the side streets. It's things that we would probably typically do if we were to go and repave that street and add those elements anyway.
Okay.
They're basic traffic safety elements.
Got it. Okay, and then on the raised crosswalks, let's go back to that for a minute. Is this the same raised crosswalks that we installed on Old Blackhawk Road at the that new subdivision?
Yes,
Stables.
exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
So now, in that particular instance, in that particular neighborhood, I don't know how other council members received phone calls, but I received a number of phone calls of folks that just did not love those raised crosswalks in their neighborhood. So have we reached out to the neighborhood to explain what these raised crosswalks really are? Or is it ADA that we're looking at there? Is that part of the reason those raised crosswalks are put in place?
The raised crosswalks, they do several things. One is they slow down vehicles. And two is they get the pedestrian and bicyclist more visible. So instead of going down a curb cut, they stay elevated at the sidewalk level. So the visibility of them is much improved with a raised crossing. So it's really a twofold measure. And to your question about feedback from Greenbrook. So a lot of Greenbrook residents wanted speed lumps or humps on Greenbrook. And of course we can't do that because it's a major collector road. It just carries too much traffic. So, you know, the raised crosswalk, although we can't do speed humps or lumps, is going to have that effect at those particular locations of slowing traffic.
Oh, they're extremely effective, but they seem like they're even higher than a normal hump or a lump.
They are, because they're a standard curb is 6 inches, the curb face, and a speed hump or lump is approximately 3.5 inches at its apex.
Okay, so I mean, the neighborhood is okay with apparently the raised crosswalks, or you at least had this conversation with them?
Yes.
Okay, all right, very good. And then there's, I don't know, maybe just a clarification. When we do the bike churros, how do we decide when some are white and when some are green? And it seems like we'd want to keep the same color for branding purposes, but is white acceptable as well?
Yes, actually, the white pavement sharrow, that was the first approved device. In the green, they call them green-backed sharrows, is kind of the slang term for them, but they came around a little bit later, and it was just to make them pop a little bit more. And you tend to see those more on arterial roadways, heavy traffic, such as Diablo Road, where we added quite a few of those several times. San Ramon Valley Boulevard, that kind of thing. So because of the green paints or the green thermoplastic is so expensive, we try to use discretion on where we use those. But in neighborhoods and with residential streets and lower volume streets, the basic white pavement sharrow tends to be more appropriate.
Okay, very good. And then just a clarification on Marcia Buersdorf. Did you actually reach out to her, or are we just relocating that sign? I know she said we were going to relocate, but have you actually talked to her?
Yeah, I responded via email to her letter, and she sent an email as well, describing that we would move the sign and work with her on that. So,
and then she was also concerned about clustering a number of signs, and that she would ask if they could be spread out a bit. Are we working with her on that as well?
Yes, we will do that. Some of the signage there proposed would go with the crosswalk, so that would be at a later date at some point. So we always work to make sure that the signs are spaced in a manner that's not obtrusive to residents, and also still convey the basic message to motorists, because we don't like what we call sign farms out there. So we make sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. No, I really appreciate that. Good, Andrew. Thank you very much.
Great. Any other questions before we open up the public hearing? Councilmember Morgan.
It's great to sit there and listen to all the council members, because your questions get answered. So I can just, I don't have to worry about all that. I appreciate all the questions. I wanted to ask you, Andrew, just really quick before, because my comments are going to come after. We did reach out, and we've been doing it with the pandemic. We've been reaching out on the Zoom platform as well, not just through letters, but also on a Zoom platform, correct?
Are you referring to the neighborhood meetings, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, in general, just to get the word out for the people that are affected by the different humps or lumps or bumps or whatever we're going to call them.
Yeah, so the meetings themselves, that was before COVID, so we actually met in person, old school. So those are all in person, but recently we had an informational meeting because it'd been so long in the process. We held a Zoom meeting on, I believe it was March 28th, which it's also that notification is in your packet, but we held that via Zoom. And then we've had a couple of phone calls with residents via Zoom too, to discuss various things.
Great to hear, because I know that they do make a lot of noise when you drive over them, and a lot of people are concerned about the noise in front of their house, because you hear the thump noise when people go over it. With the crosswalks, in reference to the lumps that we have, they're a little more forgiving versus, as you mentioned, the height of the bumps and the others, and they also allow for the emergency vehicles and the response time. So associated with that, would you say that the crosswalks, if they are raised to that extent as well, that might interfere with the response time for emergency vehicles?
Potentially, we'll definitely check in with the fire when we go to get to that phase where we're designing them. Those tend to have a little bit gradual ramp than a speed lump or hump. So, they're not as abrupt, because you have a table of a crosswalk, you have the ramp up. So they tend to be a little bit more forgiving as far as reducing speeds than a standard speed hump or lump. But we'll definitely work with fire before, during the design process of those to make sure that they're involved.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to hearing from people that are speaking as well. So thank you.
Councilmember Storer, you have one more question?
I do. And Andrew, because St. David Drive submitted their report in 2019, are we still feel comfortable that 70% is still the neighborhood percentage?
Yeah, that's part of the reason we held the informational meeting to invite folks to vet any, concerns or issues they had. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we actually heard that intensify the plan versus reduce it. We didn't get any negative feedback on the plan that was proposed and the petition submitted in 2019.
Great, very good. Thank you.
Councilmember Fong, another question?
Yeah. Hey, Andy, on Harlan Drive, when was the last survey done on Harlan? Was that 2017?
I think we might have done another in 18 as well. It was 17. It was definitely before COVID. So.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is because, I travel that street pretty much every day. And what I've noticed is that it's become very busy with bike traffic because it's really the only outlet from Iron Horse into the Greenbrook development. And two, the number of kids who are now riding to school. And number three, obviously, that much more traffic as well. So I'm curious as to what data we have, because I think it would accentuate the fact that we need to be a little more aggressive on that road.
It's largely driven by the way these work. It's not, they're not town driven, they're neighborhood driven. And that was a big distinction that we made. So the neighborhood is aware of this. Andrew and staff have reached out, but it's up to them to come back. So it doesn't look like us, the council, making, oh, we're going to redo your neighborhood. It really was a program that is self-generated. So they're aware of it, and Andrew fully expects them to be in shortly.
No, and I thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to, obviously it's even more compelling if we have more recent data. But again, thank you for your comment.
Yeah. Okay, at this time, we'll then go to the public hearing. So if there's anybody here that's joining us as attendees who would like to make any comments, there you go. Just raise your virtual raise hand feature and we will call on you. And at this time, we have one. We have Faye Isaacson. And Marie, would you please let Faye in?
Yes.
Faye, welcome. We're delighted to have you, and we're excited to hear your comments. And you have up to 3 minutes to share your comments with us. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So we live on Harlan Drive up towards St. Christopher, between St. Christopher and St. David. I have to say I'm delighted with all these proposals and that they're going to get approved. Since I live so close to St. David, I just want to make a statement that everything you're doing on St. David is very appropriate. St. David has no sidewalks. It's a very narrow street. And even, I consider myself the rolling speed bump. I go 25 through Greenbrook all the time because I want to slow the cars behind me. But when I go St. David, it's so narrow, I typically go about 20. And so I'm thrilled to see that. I like everything you're doing with St. Christopher. Also, people speed up that hill. And as for Harlan, I like the basics that you're doing. Within the last month, somebody came door to door and I signed a petition. So I'm hopeful that there is something active going on for Harlan Drive because cars do speed down the street. And I am a little concerned, being a resident on Harlan. I find that as people are going, I guess that would be north on Harlan, and they want to make a shortcut. They're going to go north on Harlan. They would have gone up to St. Christopher to turn left, but instead they duck into St. David and go down that way. So this is going to change their direction in the future when St. David has those speed lumps. They're going to stay on Harlan, which is good because St. David, like I said, is a narrower street and people should go slower. And if it deters the traffic, great, because there are a lot of people who go through this shortcut to go to St. Christopher. Now that will add more traffic onto Harlan in front of my house. So I do know that in the last few years, there are a lot of new residents on Harlan that have little kids, a lot of people moving in with little kids. and they put out the kid-friendly slow down, and that has slowed people down. So I'm summing up. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Hey, thank you so much, and we really appreciate your comments. And you're right, we do expect to hear you back when Harlan comes back for its own NTMP. Is there anybody else who would like to address us here in the attendees? If so, please use your raise hand feature in Zoom and we will call on you. I do not see any others. Marie, do you see anybody?
There are no other speakers for this item.
Okay, and then we'll close the public hearing on this item and bring it back to the council. And just note that we did have the 2 letters that Andrew had went through. And now back for the council. Any comments? We'll start with Renee Morgan.
First of all, I wanted to say that the traditional methods, have been tried in various areas. And I know as council members, we receive notification from residents about they feel that there's speeding going on in their neighborhoods. And, from Andy, from your perspective, I mean, this is a lot of digging deep.
Renee, I'm sorry. I just noticed, I think they just missed their button. Would you mind?
Oh, somebody wants to ask a question?
Yeah, with Rob.
Oh, sure.
I might have missed, honestly. I think just when I was saying it.
No worries. No worries. Go ahead.
Are we okay to, I know when we close a public hearing, are we okay to reopen it for that person? Rob?
Yeah, the hand went up, I think, right as you were.
Yeah, and I apologize. I looked over to because I had to look over to this side when it's that. Okay, so we'll go back to Anastasia and Maria, if you would let her in. And Anastasia, we apologize we didn't see you earlier. And we welcome your comments. Thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you so much. I was slow to find the button myself, so I appreciate it. I just wanted to echo what the previous citizen said in applauding all of the hard work that undoubtedly has gone into these plans. I live right at 199 Greenbrook Drive. I moved here just under 2 years ago, so at the very beginning of COVID, and the traffic patterns have increased beyond what I thought I was signing up for moving onto this road. I would argue that the 2017 surveys of speeds are probably could be blown out of the water with how fast drivers go in front of my house all through the day, but at particular times of day. And I do observe it carefully because I mostly work from home and I have a Charlottewood middle schooler who attempts to cross the road, and I stand out there on the sidewalk and help make sure he makes it safely because it is not safe. So I'm looking at the plans and I can see that there are a lot of components to it. I'm wondering if any possibility is there to add a couple more road paintings that show the 25 mile per hour speed limit, not necessarily signs up, upright or vertical signs, but rather to increase the number of speed limit signs right on the road so that it wouldn't be an aesthetic issue and we wouldn't have the sign farm that someone alluded to, but rather if you look at the map, maybe this could help address the fact that from Mustang Drive, if you're driving east from Mustang Drive all the way to where now I'm just squinting and looking at this map, you really don't have 25 mile per hour sign from what I can see. There's a painted sign right around Brookside Drive, and there's a painted sign just before Harlan Drive. And then you keep on going for quite some time before there's another 25 miles an hour painted. But if you're heading eastbound, you don't have a street sign that says 25 miles per hour. And I just think that there might be an opportunity to increase how much we're drawing attention to the fact that it is a 25 mile per hour speed limit. That is my question.
Okay.
So I will leave it there. Thank you.
Great. Anastasia, thank you so much. And again, my apologies for missing out. So at this time, I'm going to ask one more time, is there anybody else who would like to make any public comment? If so, please use the virtual raise hand feature. It's on the lower section of your screen, just next to record and next to in between record and live transcript? I do not see any others. Marie, do you see any others?
I don't see any other raised hands.
Okay, last call, and we cannot open the public hearing after this. Okay, we'll close the public hearing, and thank you. And Andrew, can you make a comment on Anastasia's question about additional signage for speeding?
Sure. So I believe the request was to add additional pavement legends on the ground. That's the 25-mile-per-hour pavement legend. So we do have them spread out throughout the plan, and we will look for an opportunity to install or add one or two additional east and west of Mustang Drive. I think that can be accommodated fairly easily.
Right. Perfect answer. Thank you. Makes it easy for us. Okay, so it's before the council. And Renee Morgan, thank you for letting me interrupt you. Back to you.
No worries at all. It's great to have all the input. I appreciate all that as well. So like I was saying, it's, traditional methods have been tried in these areas. We as council members get a lot of times we have people that will, residents that will call us and tell us that, somebody's speeding and they would love to have speed, lumps, humps, or bumps, or whatever it may be that they're requiring. And I think that staff does a great job on going back. And, Andy, if you wouldn't mind, I think it would be great to also feature this in maybe one of our newsletters as well, so that people understand how much of a process it is to go through this, to authorize having the markings and everything else, and all of the different, things and elements that go into this. So from our perspective, the quarterly newsletter, I think, would be a great opportunity, or on the web, whatever you want to do. But with that, I know that people might want to make comments, but I would like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 27-2022, authorizing the installation of traffic calming measures on Greenbrook Drive, St. Christopher Drive, St. David Drive, and Harlan Drive, including the ones that were just mentioned by the last speaker that Andy said would be possible to do.
And also, in a second, and also would they include comments that Andrew had made to the accommodations of the sign placements that from the two folks that wrote letters?
Right, exactly. Let's do that, as well as we talked about the fire department being, spoken to, but as well. So,
okay,
yes.
Great. And the second, that was seconded by Councilmember Stepper.
Yes.
Okay. Any further comments before we vote?
Yeah.
Okay, Karen, go ahead.
I just want to say, since it was my opportunity to be on farmer's market in the rain last Saturday for 2 hours, that I never not put out these TMP. The little brochures that we have are really complete, and Andy has really done an amazing job, the number of these that he has instituted in our community. And so that and I know you write frequently, and Renee's just asking for another time that you put that in their newsletter, because this is something that truly is neighborhood driven, and not very many things are local the way we would like them to be. So we really appreciate all the neighborhood comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Karen. Councilman or Vice Mayor Storr.
Great, thank you. And I think we've said it all here, but I want to thank Caitlin Costa for doing a really fine job here. And welcome aboard. We'll look forward to working with you. Hope you enjoyed this experience.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further comments, let's ask Marie Senseri, our city clerk, to take the roll.
Okay, this is for the resolution and also the neighborhood recommendations for the sign placements. Councilmember Fong.
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan.
Yes.
Councilmember Stepper.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Storer.
Yes.
And Mayor Arnerich.
Aye.
Resolution was approved unanimously.
Great. And again, Andrew, Caitlin, the speakers who were here tonight, and all the people who participated over the time, we appreciate your input and look forward to helping make neighborhoods safer. So thank you very much for that. Okay, this will take us to our next item as I go back to the agenda. And this is under item number 9, which is informational staff reports. And 9.1 is our quarterly investment report with Chandler Asset Management. And tonight we have Jenny, who is back to give us a verbal report, and she'll share her screen as well.
Great. Thank you, Honorable Mayor Arnerich, council members, staff, and members of the public. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see the investment report. Okay, so as he mentioned, I'm Jenny Linkowitz. I'm a senior portfolio manager at Chandler Asset Management. Before we get to the portfolio itself, we're going to briefly discuss the economy. So feel free to stop me at any point if you have a question. The main thing that we're seeing in the market right now is higher interest rates, significantly higher. And we're seeing them moving close to 3%. And one of the reasons for that has been really elevated inflation. And we'll talk about that. One of the things that's been exacerbating that has been the tragic crisis in Ukraine. That's been pressuring some prices on energy and food higher. And we're also still seeing the impact of the stimulus, fiscal and monetary, that was put in place to help the U.S. economy survive the pandemic. So we're still seeing the effects of that. So higher interest rates have created higher yield opportunities for reinvestment. So that's the good part about it. From a yield standpoint, that's good. You know, over the last 2 years, you know, in March of 20, when the pandemic hit, we saw yields come crashing down, and now we're seeing them the reverse, where they're coming back up. But the other side of that is that we're when yields go up, prices go down on bonds. So we have seen a decrease in the mark-to-market pricing in the portfolio as those prices do move inversely to yields. We did see the Fed hike short-term rates by 0.25% at their March meeting. We're expecting a potential additional 0.5% hike when they meet again in May, and then another potential hike in June. The bond market, however, has already priced in the equivalent of 10 quarter-point hikes over the next year. So the bond market is already looking ahead and expecting a number of hikes over the next year. So the Fed's dual mandate when they're making these decisions is both stable prices and full employment. So taking a look at the employment picture, we've seen really strong non-farm payroll numbers. The average has been about 600,000 jobs added to the U.S. economy every month over the past 6 months. And that's pushed the unemployment rate down to about 3.6%. Before the pandemic, it went as low as 3.5%. So we're basically at full employment, and the labor market has been really red hot. For the Bay Area, it's been pretty similar. For February, it was about 3.4% unemployment, so just lower than the national average in your local area. We have seen the quits rate right around 3% on a seasonally adjusted basis, and so that's a result of the Great Resignation going on. A lot of employees are leaving jobs to try to find better paying jobs, or they're leaving for early retirement or to travel. But we are starting to see the participation rate tick back up again. And we're also seeing wage growth of about 5.6% over the past year. So that's been pushing inflation rates higher. The next slide shows CPI, which we got a report recently of about 8.5% increase in prices year over year for March. So that's pretty significant. In the San Francisco area, it's been a little more tame, but still high. It's up about 5.2% year over year for February. So that's still significantly higher than it was a year ago. We're seeing a lot of different factors contributing to that. We're seeing both energy costs, food, and shelter are all contributing. And gasoline prices were responsible for about half of the recent increases. Now, the Fed's preferred metric is core PCE on the right, and that was up about 5.4% as of February. Their target is 2%. So as you can see, this is significantly higher than the target that the Fed is looking to achieve. Another reason why inflation has been so high is the consumer has been very healthy and demanding a lot of goods and services. We're shifting more from goods to services now that the economy is starting to reopen. We had retail sales about 7% year over year for March, so that's pretty strong. Gas stations were a major contributor to that, as well as bars and restaurants as those reopen again.
We've lost you. Jenny? We lost you there.
Okay.
All right, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Yes, we lost your screen.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you fine. We
Okay,
just
great.
can't see your screen.
Yeah, I'm going to reshare my screen, and I'm not going to put my video back on because I think
Okay.
that takes a lot of bandwidth
Sounds
away
good.
for me.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so there's the screen again.
Yes.
So we are seeing, in general, gasoline costs are starting to displace some other discretionary spending. So that's a little bit of a concern, but consumers are feeling more confident because they're able to get higher wages. So that has been contributing to the higher consumer confidence levels. I'm going to skip over to housing. That's been another really strong part of the U.S. economy recently. We had housing starts that were reported at 1.8 million units annualized. So that's the strongest level since 2006. This has been largely driven by multifamily housing growth. So we're seeing a lot of apartment buildings and townhouses and things like that being constructed. That's up 26% year over year for multifamily. And then prices themselves, I'm sure you have seen, are up quite a bit over the year, 19% on a nationwide basis. For the Bay Area, it's even higher. It's about 21% year over year. So we've seen quite a bit of price appreciation. But we saw mortgage rates on 30-year fixed mortgages rise above 5%. And affordability is starting to become an issue for many prospective home buyers. Manufacturing, I'll just comment briefly, has been in expansion territory. It's been driven by high demand. And we're still seeing some supply chain disruptions persisting and having an impact on production. GDP, the measure of U.S. economic activity, has been growing at a very fast pace, in the fourth quarter of 2021. So growth for all of that year was 5.7%. And we saw the consumer was a big part of that, and also gross private domestic investment, which is CapEx, has really picked up as well, as companies invest in technology and other things. And so that's been a welcome change. We're expecting about 3.2% for 2022. So we're expecting this growth rate to moderate from such a hot pace. And then the Federal Reserve balance sheet, they've been purchasing assets until the month of March, treasuries and mortgages. And that is expected to start to wind down as they don't reinvest all of the maturities starting likely at the May meeting. So we're likely going to see this balance sheet, which is twice as large as it was at the peak of the financial crisis. We're expecting to see that start to roll off at a rate of about 1.1 trillion per year to start. And then the Fed funds rate, as I mentioned, was raised by a 0.25% back at the March meeting. And we're expecting these rates, which govern a lot of short-term liquidity vehicles and money market funds and things like that, we're starting to see that rise up a little bit, and we should see that rapidly increase again as the Fed hikes rates later in the year. It's important to note that as bond yields rise, that could have an impact of slowing the U.S. economy as well. So we're going to be watching that very closely. Bond yields have really increased dramatically. The 2-year yield is the one that is most impactful to the portfolio, I would say, and that's up to about 2.62%. And that was well below 1% last year. So this is really increased at a very high level. And we're getting close to 3% on the 5 and the 10-year as well. So really much higher yields. And this is illustrated on the right-hand side with the yield curve. Look at 1 year ago, how much lower rates were. And now we're seeing rates significantly higher, and we're seeing them really flatten out when you go past 2 years. So you're not at the time that this was printed, there was even a little bit of an inversion in some parts of the yield curve. So we watch that very carefully because an inversion can be a sign that a recession is on the horizon. As of right now, we don't place a high probability of a recession in the next year, but we'll be watching this very closely. Now we'll take a look at the portfolio. Our focus when we're investing is safety of principal first, then liquidity, and then yield is our third objective. And our performance objective is measured versus the Bank of America 1 to 3 year U.S. Treasury index. And when we're purchasing securities, we're buying high quality bonds that fit within the parameters of state law and also the town's investment policy. So we have the compliance report as of the end of March, shows that everything is in compliance. And looking at the characteristics of the portfolio on this slide, we've got the previous quarter on the right, the current quarter in the middle, and then the benchmark comparison on the left. And the duration, which is the measure of interest rate risk in the portfolio, you can see we've kept it neutral with the benchmark. So with all the volatility, we weren't wanting to be too offsides in either direction. The purchase yield on a weighted average basis, this is what you're actually earning if we hold all the bonds in the portfolio to maturity. So it's been pretty stable. We've been investing at higher yields now, but some of the securities that are maturing off were purchased back in 2018, for example, when rates were high as well. So we're seeing that right around 1.14%. But the market yield has more than tripled. It went from 0.69% all the way to 2.09. So that's the yield if we were to purchase the portfolio today. That's the yield that we would expect to get roughly. So much, much higher than it was before. So that's overall, it's a positive because it means that your earnings are going to hopefully be trending higher. The average quality is very high, just one notch below the highest level of AAA. And we did see the market value increase despite that change in interest rates, but that's due to a cash contribution made into the portfolio. So that's the reason why that went up, even though rates are so much higher. And for sector distribution, there weren't major changes to the actual composition of the portfolio itself. We've got about a little over 70% invested in U.S. government securities. We've got 17% in high quality corporates, 6% in asset-backed securities. Those are backed by auto loans and leases and equipment loans and leases as well. And then supranationals are about 5% of the portfolio. We've been focusing with purchases on the 2 to 3 year part of the yield curve, sometimes 4 years as well. We've been purchasing treasuries, agencies, high quality corporates, and asset-backed securities. And we did do a few sales over the course of the quarter. We realized gains of about $40,000 versus book value. And issuer-wise, some of the names that we added to the portfolio over the quarter were Apple and MasterCard. We've really been focusing on high-quality credits that have been doing well despite the pandemic. And duration distribution versus the benchmark shows how the portfolio is positioned. And the portfolio is in green and the benchmark is in gray. And I think the biggest story here is that we've got about 19% of the portfolio maturing 1 year or less. So those are funds that could be used for liquidity if the town were to need that, or else we can use it to reinvest and reposition the portfolio without being forced to make a sale if we don't want to. And we will see why we don't want to do that on a future slide. Looking at the purchase yield, you can see it's been trending downwards, but it's starting to level off. We're at 1.14%, as I mentioned. And then looking at portfolio growth over time, total realized return are very close to each other right now. So sitting at about 3.43% per annum. And that's versus LAIF, a comparable LAIF investment, which would have been significantly lower. And looking at investment performance over the 27 years that Chandler's been investing the town's funds over many market cycles, when we're looking at this, we're taking into consideration both income in the portfolio, also realized and unrealized gains and losses. So since inception, the return has been 3.43% per year. So that's outperformance of about 0.26%. And you can see we've consistently outperformed over time. And as you can see over the last 2 years, because we had very low yields and now they've snapped higher, you can see that there's negative total returns. But I want to focus, mention that when we're investing these funds, this is mostly a buy and hold strategy. Historically, the only time we've made a sale in the portfolio is if we can do that at a gain. So we're really focusing on the purchase yield, of 1.14% when we're looking at this. And we've been earning income in the portfolio at a pace of approximately $75,000 a month for the fixed income securities in the portfolio. And then taking a look at the Nereid Improvement Fund, this is invested solely in short-term treasuries. So it's very conservative. The purchase yield has come up significantly over the past quarter as we've been reinvesting at higher rates. And there's been very little change in the market value. This is a pretty stable investment strategy here. And the remainder of the presentation consists of the holdings in the town's portfolio. And then we've also got a list of transactions that we've been making. So I just want to point out that we've seen yields rise over time. When we started investing in January, we were getting, you can see about 1.2%, and then you can see that climbing over 2% over the remainder of the period. And there's the sales that I mentioned. We sold some short-term securities. And we also invested the cash contribution that we received in February. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take your questions at this time.
Great. Thank you so much. If you want to take your screen share off, Jenny, that'd be great.
Sure.
Thank you. Well, great. Thank you for that update. It is sort of nice to hear as things are going up. And since we're a community where we don't borrow money, when interest rates go up, it's only good news for us because we make more money and we're not having to offset it against debt. So thank you. I had just a quick question, and maybe this is for Joe. On Nereid funds, Joe, does that 865,000 we have in there is, I think, Nereid, does that include the portion of Diablo that we were working on the trail? Any of those intersection improvements, would those qualify for Nereid funds?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, the Nereid funds that we're holding are related to the long delayed signal that was planned years ago, but for which warrants have yet to be met at the entrance into the McGee Ranch subdivision.
Oh.
And I believe the reserve fund is my recollection.
Okay,
There's a little bit of money in there for some retaining wall work on Diablo that I think can go into the project. And we've also done some preliminary looking at whether or not we could move some of that other money into that trail, but we don't have a definitive answer on it.
Well, great. No, thank you for having it on the radar. Questions of Jenny or this time? Anything? Councilmember Morgan?
Thanks so much for being here this evening. I know that you're virtually here, but it's nice to see you anyways. You mentioned the focus being on short term, and we've been predominantly, buying and holding and with the purchase yields. Can you explain to us, as well as just the people that are listening, why we're changing that methodology at this point in time?
Yeah, so we've been using a really disciplined approach when we've been investing. So we typically take maturities or new funds, and we invest it out 2 to 4 years in general. We can invest anywhere from short term to out to 4 or 5 years if we'd like, but we've generally been keeping it a little shorter term. And I'm just kind of focusing on the purchase yield, because I think when people see total return and they see mark to market and negative returns, I just want to focus that because we're not doing sales, that we're not actually realizing a negative return in the portfolio. So
which means we don't lose money. Right. We don't lose money on any of our transactions.
Right. Which is exactly what I was trying to get to. Is it's so important, and that's why it's great to have all of you taking a look at our portfolio and managing that, as well as Lonnie Haw and her team. So thank you so much.
Along that question, Jenny, is generally speaking, when the market looks more volatile, we have a tendency to shorten the duration. And as things start to level out, we get back to that more traditional bell curve. That's kind of the strategy I think I've seen over the past years.
Yeah, sometimes in a rising rate environment, we'll see the duration drift a little lower. I think, right now, we just want to make sure that we're taking advantage of these higher yields, because, inflation, although it's quite elevated right now, it is expected to go down next year. Eventually, we're seeing kind of the impact of the pandemic sort of, get drawn out longer than it was expected. Part of that is, a lot of the public agencies are starting to get their second round of ARPA funds, and they're starting to do the capital improvement projects and things that, I think I've heard about in a lot of meetings I've been attending. And so that kind of, has been also sort of driving up the prices of some of the supplies and things. So we could see inflation be a factor and be elevated, throughout this year. But, eventually that's going to, hopefully moderate. We're seeing the Fed start to raise rates to combat inflation. We're seeing them, withdraw the accommodation that they've put into the market. So that's all going to have a lag effect as time goes on. So it could be that, we don't know what's going to happen with interest rates, but the bond market is always looking forward. And, if you look at the 10-year, or you look at, some of these proxies for longer term inflation and rates, they're sitting, just below 3%. So I think, the idea is if we can lock that in, if there is a recession in a few years and, we purchase these securities at higher yields, then we'll lock that in. And it's, if we can get a higher yield for the town, we'd rather do that.
Great. Thank you. Other questions, comments? Councilmember Stepper? Karen, I'm sorry, you need to unmute.
Sorry, somebody went by again. I turned it off. Thank you. I wanted to compliment you on the two things that you did with the corporate, with the Apple and MasterCard, because they're, sure, companies that people have heard it a long time, but we're not actually in the stock market per se. We're really into the loans to and interest rates. And so I think those will bide us well for going into the future. So people need to know that we have really high standards for when we even go even a little bit into the corporate world, and that we're very conservatively balanced. And that's why we're coming out so well this year. And special thanks to Lonnie up there in the corner in my Zoom. I don't know where she is on your Zoom schedule, but for helping us get to the point where we are able to come out of this early, this pandemic. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I just want to point out that California code allows public agencies in the state of California to go up as high as 30% in corporates. And we actually manage that more conservatively with a 20% limit. And we also have some credit quality restrictions that are more conservative than code as well.
Exactly. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jenny, thank you so much. We appreciate seeing you, and we look forward. And just a note at the pre-council agenda review this morning, Lonnie mentioned you'll see LAIF had shown $17 million at the time this was cut off. And LAIF is an account that we sweep into for cash flow or between assets. That now most of that money has moved back into our market position. So,
oh, good.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jenny, and we look forward to seeing you on our next quarter. It come by quick and fast.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. So this takes us to item number 10.1, which is town council updates. I do not have any. Are there any updates from town council members? Councilmember Stepper.
Just kind of a quick announcement. So I want to make sure everyone in Danville is going out of the house on Saturday morning, because this Saturday morning, the person who got a proclamation, which was Discovery Counseling, is providing materials along with the council for Contra Costa Child Council and Exchange Club in front of Lunardi's. So you can come, bring your kids, get those materials, and pet either a scaly reptile or a furry barnyard animal for free. But at the same time, LaserX is having its run, and the sheep shearing's going on at Forest Farms. And especially, I want to repeat the lend a hand that's going on in Danville, that you can help your neighbors or they can get help. So be sure and be out Saturday morning, because the rain's not coming till later.
Great. Thanks, Karen. Okay, with that, then we will adjourn our regular Danville Council meeting, and we'll call to order the Danville Disaster Council.
Oh, okay.
And that's item number 12. And 12.1 would be report on upcoming activities for Emergency Services Manager, Marcel Indelicato. Marcel, welcome. It's good to see you again.
Great to see everybody. Good evening, Mayor and members of the Town Council. Happy to be here. Just want to remind folks, this is not a new slide, really. These program goals don't change a whole lot. They may be slightly modified, or focus may shift depending on project evolution and development of program needs. So just want to remind you that that's kind of our foundation in which we operate. So I want to sort of just give you a 6-month review and then sort of look ahead in the future and future slides. The resources and relationships piece for program overview. the standard department and safety staff meetings, particular pride in the safety staff meeting because it's kind of morphed slightly into the emergency preparedness committee, which I'm pretty proud of, and they look forward to updates every quarter. And the communications piece with our EOC leadership, if it's something about weather, county operations, updates, power outages. I mean, I really keep the communication flowing. To me, communication generates sharing and thoughts and people asking questions. And to me, that results in engagement. And that's what really one of the main things I really strive to do. Under site visits, I continue to get out sort of in sweeps and do site visits. I've wrapped up all the kids' country sites, a lot of fun. I did a follow-up presentation at one of the kids' countries on emergency and disaster preparedness. I actually partnered with San Ramon Valley Fire on that one, and that went really well. Also, there's 6 care facilities that listed there. I won't read them off that I've visited. Again, the Granny's Loving Angels and the Serving Hands, the executive director, after our visit several months down the road, was comfortable enough to call and ask a question. Somebody had taken her COVID precaution signs from her front doors, and she owned 2 care homes. And she just picked up the phone, called me and said, hey, have you guys heard of anything else like that that's been happening around town? And sort of just, kind of, and I felt good about that she was comfortable following up and then developed her own plan of action and filed a report on that actually, because she was the only one that appeared to have happened. As far as response goes, I mean, we've already touched on COVID. We're nicely and slowly sort of continuing to ease out of it. I think it's really just morphing into how we better plan for pandemics and germs and the like. And also our town is not immune to our power outages. And let me tell you, there's a lot of ways that the power outages come. And actually, since I put this presentation together, we have a 3rd power outage. That was actually an underground equipment failure just recently, a few days ago. But whether it's a tree limb, a squirrel, there's lots of things that can play havoc with power. So it's not surprising that we do our fair share. And that's why we like to really teach the community of how to be prepared for those, because those are just everyday bread and butter. So again, these 2 slides on program review to me are sort of pillars of collaboration, which is really where I put my heart and soul. But here's some training and drills and exercises that I've participated in or contributed in the last 6 months. The County Office of Emergency Services did a flood scenario tabletop. We were the only local jurisdiction that was there participating. So I was, again, pretty proud of that. Also, I look forward to the new employee orientations. I sort of eagerly track down our new hires that are around the corner. I think it's a nice touch point into our organization to sit down with somebody who, likes to smile and basically say, tell me a little bit about yourself and your emergency disaster planning, both personally and professionally, and then lend some expertise if they want any. So I'm pretty excited about that. Also conducted a documentation unit briefing that again came out of comfort from the staff that said, hey, could you talk to me a little bit more about this planning section thing and documentation? And we talked about that. We talked about our couple of disasters that we've actually did documentation on and submitted regarding COVID and the storms. And we talked about, so that, again, that was good. That's my job, is to make sure people are comfortable following up and coming forward. Other presentations that I did in partnership with other members of our community, both PG&E and San Ramon Valley Fire, was the Community Presbyterian Church. We did emergency preparedness to all the staff and teachers. Senior Center power outage with a PG&E partner, and then Kids Country, as I mentioned earlier, that site visit resulted in a preparedness presentation, which was really very, very cool to do. And then I just love getting, when people are on our websites and they see my name and email me, I love getting these emails. This last one since we met came from a Boy Scout that was getting his Eagle Scout preparedness badge, and just ask some generic questions about emergency preparedness and disaster management and what is that all about and what we do here in Danville and just general. And I just love responding to those. Building trust and comfort is what I strive for. These are the results I'm looking for, whether it be our internal staff or our external partners. So let's look at a little bit of current initiatives. Again, partnerships are key. We do a lot of partnering with PG&E, again, because the power outages can be so sort of frequent and routine, and site visits with AT&T facilities and the like. Better understanding our infrastructure and its reliability is super important. So I've tried to make that a focus since I hit the streets here. And emergency operations plan, diving into that update a little bit more deeply in terms of, what do we want to keep in there? What do we want to add? What do we want to move around? Those sorts of things. And so that'll be fun to continue to work on that. And then from a response perspective, one of the current initiatives is this highway advisory radio system review. And I'm partnering with the police department, our public information officer, our IT group, and then San Ramon Valley Fire, and or actually not San Ramon Valley City, because we've been had an MOU with them around the HAR system. And what do we do with that system? And is it redundant? Is it cost benefit analysis with a cost of getting it back up and running smoothly? And so we're exploring that, and that's interesting. I sort of like those kind of equipment and public outreach projects to work on. The 2 standby contracts that you mentioned last time I visited you all, been feverishly working on those. One of them we're just waiting on some pricing. The other one we're waiting on kind of getting a couple additional documents attached to the base contract, the standby contract. So those have been really fun to work on as well. And you will be getting an emergency operations wallet card soon, hopefully in a mailbox near you. So we've got that into the printer. And outreach, very, very excited this year to be a part of the annual outreach project with the Policy Advisory Council. And I sort of was the work behind the outline of that and what it looks like. And I'm going to partner and actually meet with our PIO on Monday. We have about all kinds of social media and public outreach. And I'm going to sort of vet our ideas with her and just sort of make sure that we're aligning our efforts appropriately and that she likes where we're headed. So those are some of the current initiatives that are in the works. So let's look ahead a little bit to the future. I look forward to the new building and the staff orientation for the new EOC very much. And also we're going to do an external partner tour, probably the same day we do the staff orientation, to lay some eyes on the new building. And I think that'll be awesome. And then as far as planning goes, the local hazard mitigation plan is still on the county's to-do list. FEMA has been a little bit behind in approving the RFIs, request for information. But as soon as that happens, they're, despite the county's OES limited staff, they're ready to move on that. So look forward to working on that project. I might even probably be asked to sort of co-chair the steering committee down the road for them, just because of my involvement and expertise in the past on local hazard mitigation planning. And then response is, really ever in the forefronts of our minds in terms of awareness. Fire season and smoke detector campaign I'm working on with San Ramon Valley Fire. They're also doing some drowning prevention related to community outreach for those that own pools in our town. Obviously heat safety, and really I kind of put anything weather sort of in this category. And obviously we've touched already on the power safety, the public safety power shutoffs and all the reasons that power can be interrupted. Continuing to look at the future, May and June, the next couple of months are actually going to be rather busy. There is a county OES Golden Eagle EOC exercise of which I've been asked to be an evaluator, and I'll be contributing them and taking away hopefully some highlights from that as well. Look forward to continuing my senior center presentations. The next one I have scheduled for June is heat and wildfire. And the big sort of emergency planning conference in the sky is this California Emergency Services Conference. So after many years, of course, being on hold, they're holding that in person in May. I'm going to get to go to that. And I look forward to my first teen center emergency preparedness presentation. So I'm working with Lindsay on that. That's going to be in June sometime. And some other ones that that popped up that aren't necessarily on this slide. PG&E, we were just invited to an exercise. It's their public safety power shutoff wildfire exercise. They're doing a seminar and then a tabletop and a full scale. That's not uncommon to do it that way. It's sort of a stepping stone approach. And so I'll be doing a couple of those. And also the CARE, the nonprofit community awareness emergency response, does an annual school shelter in place drill every year. And I sit on that outreach committee and emergency preparedness committee. And of course, don't forget the great California Shakeout in October, the 20th, 10/20 at 10:20 in the morning. They try to make it really easy for us to remember. So I look forward to all my future community endeavors. That completes my report, and I appreciate you allowing me to spend some time with you this evening.
Great, Marcel. Thank you, gosh, for all the updates. And you're right, as things are opening up, we're back to, thank God we didn't have as many emergencies during the COVID time, but with the opportunity, our new building and our new EOC, perfect timing to get back in the wagon here and do updates. Any questions or comments? Vice Mayor Storr.
Great, thanks, Marcel. Always wonderful report. I appreciate it. Can you give us some information on the Citizen Emergency Response Team certs? Are they up and running again? And how many graduates do we have at this point?
They are. They started a new class in March, actually, last month. I'm excited to report, and they're always full. I think they always have a waiting list. I don't have an exact number. I'm meeting with Danielle Bell tomorrow. I can get an exact number of graduates, but the Policy Advisory Committee public outreach program that I mentioned, our annual project, we're going to solicit the help of them as well. And hopefully get some re-engagement with the volunteer hours, because like you said earlier in the evening, they come with time and big hearts. So yeah, it's finally back in the saddle, so to speak.
And I appreciate you talking about the public safety power shutoffs. Have we developed a relationship with PG&E or their representatives so we can help our citizens understand when we may be shutting powers off in certain parts of town?
Yes, I feel pretty good about our strong relationship with both the field representative and then their leadership on up, and our public information officer, Nicola, and I are constantly talking about communications. And I have to say the last power outage that I mentioned was underground equipment failure that just happened. I'm telling you, the updates came in like clockwork. So they're really listening, and we nicely keep telling them what our needs are. So I'm feeling pretty good about that.
Good to hear. And I know you visited some of the sites. I know you mentioned Kids Country, and we got a lot of kids there, so naturally that's an important part of it. What about the school containers with the emergency supplies? Do we have access to those, or do you have access to those, or is that just school related?
We have access to people that have access.
Okay.
And so when I first got here last year, I went to every single school site and laid eyes on those with Danny Hillman, one of the superintendents. And let me tell you, that's the first thing they tell me when I walk on campus, is they show me that. Yeah, so we have access to that.
And the ham radio folks are still doing their tests, I see, in the community. So
Yep.
that's a big deal. I appreciate those folks that do that.
And we've got great volunteers on our roster, our EOC roster, that we can call at the drop of a hat,
Yeah.
that can help do amateur radio communications for us if we had a need.
Yeah. Great. I appreciate the update. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councilmember Stepper. Karen, sorry, you need to unmute.
My dog again.
No, thank you for muting.
Apologize. Keep shutting it off. I used to volunteer at Stanford Hospital with one of a victim of drowning. And so I've seen what the impact is. And I just wanted to make sure people knew they could come down this weekend and get these. I didn't know they were doing a drowning prevention, but there are these things you can get there for a lanyard for one person in your party. And I do mean people have parties at the end of school and everything. One person will have that on, even if they change it to another person. So there's always somebody who has 100% of their eye on the pool. And so I think it's just, I can't say it strongly enough, because of course we always had these pool rules that came right out of here with Nadine, and those losses are irreplaceable. So thank you.
Totally agree. Thank you, council member.
Okay. All right. Well, Marcel, again, thank you. We look forward to your updates, and glad to particularly hear CERT's back. That's just a wonderful program, but it also helps remind our community that they can get involved and make a difference. A very robust program. So with that, seeing no further business, this will adjourn our meetings. And Marisa and Siri, our city clerk, thank you for everything, for getting us online again. Another successful meeting.